All right, welcome to 5.6. Composition of functions is what it's called, but we're always probably going to call it fog and goff, f of g and g of f. And these are little bitty circles. They're not big O's. They're not multiplication dots. That little bitty O stands for the word of, f of g of x, g of f of x, but we'll call it fog and goff because that's fun to say, let's be honest. So the thing is, uh, f of g and g of f are basically one function sitting inside the other one. And it's really easy to figure out which one's the inside. Well, it's the one closest to your variable here. So this is g sitting inside of f like this, and this is f sitting inside of g. So what we'll be able to do is we'll take the entire f function, whatever it is, and plug it into g. Um, Go ahead and write this down. It's a little weird. Basically, when we plug into one, it'll give us an answer. We'll take that answer and plug it into another one. So it kind of looks like this, where we plug into f, it gives us f of x. F of x now becomes the input of g, and output of g will be g of f of x. So we took f of x, plugged it into g, and got g of f. So we'll start fairly simple on this. Actually, yeah, let's ignore this down here in black real quick. So f of x is 3x minus 4, and g of x is x squared plus 2. When I say find f of g of 3, that means start with the g function, plug in 3, which is what we did here. And 9 plus 2 is 11. Now we're going to take g of 3. G of 3 is 11, and we're going to plug it into f. The f function, 3x minus 4 is now 3 times 11 minus 4, and we get 29. G of f of negative 1 means now we're going to plug in negative 1 here into f and get negative 7. Negative 7 will then be plugged into g, and we calculate that way. If I did f of g of negative 1, so I'm using the same input, but instead of g of f, I'm doing f of g, we definitely get something different because now we start with g. We do negative 1 squared plus 2 is 3. 3 gets plugged in, and these are two different answers because we did kind of our order of operations in different order. I'm going to come back to this. Go ahead and write it down, though. It may help. But we plug into one, get an answer, take that answer and plug it into the other one, and just make sure we label it, hey, this is the way we went. We did G first and then F, or we did F first and then G. So if they don't give us a number to plug in, what this does is it helps us potentially plug in multiple numbers really quick, instead of having to plug it into one, then plug it into the other, then go back and plug in one, plug into the other. Find f of g of x. Well, we're just going to take this entire g function and we're going to place it right there for the x. So now it's x squared plus 3 plus 2. The parentheses don't matter. I took them away, and then you just combine like that. So now if I wanted f of g of 7, I could just plug in a 7 right here rather than plugging it in here, calculating, and then plugging it in here or whatever. G of f is the other way around. We're going to take this. We're going to plug it in for that x. And this x plus 2 all squared just means we're going to FOIL right here. And we get two different things, which is why back here we got two different answers for g of f of negative 1 and f of g of negative 1. So what we can do back here is we did f of g, and so we took g and plugged inside f. And then I could do f of g of 3 and just plug it in here. 9 times 3 is 27, plus 2 is the 29 we got. And it makes things go a little bit quicker. So here's just a little bit more practice. We got this whole list of find f of g of this, and f of g of this, and g of f of this, and g of f of this. And technically we could plug into one and plug into the other, but the first instructions actually just say find f of g and g of f. So on f of g, we take the 3x plus 5, plug it into x. Now notice that this x is gone. It is replacing this x. So I'm not going to have like 2x and then like distribute a 2x. That's not how it works. The x is gone. So 2 times 3x plus 5, distribute, combine like terms. This one is plug this one into this x, distribute, combine like terms. And then with f of g of 3, I don't have to plug in here, find an answer, and then plug in here. I have this f of g. That would be so much easier to plug into once, 18 plus 17, 35. And we did that with all of these. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. They'll give you this table, and basically they're going to say find f of g of 16. Now, this is all the same, but written 3 different ways. They like to do double parentheses. I would prefer a bracket instead of that second parentheses, but honestly, it's just easier to write f of g. But anyway, how this works is, and kind of going back to like this slide here, they're going to give us an input, we're going to plug it in, it's going to spit an output. That output, we're going to go to the other function and use that as the input. So f of g of 16 means start with g of 16 here, and you're going to have to ignore the highlighters for a second. 16 then gives us 8 if we plug in 16 to the g function. 8, you can see it's underlined in purple, then becomes our input for the other function. And then 8 spits out 12. So f of g is 12. Now g of f of 8 means we're going to start here, go to 12, because that's what it spits out. 12 is our new input, 12 spits out 6. So g of f of 8 is 6. I wanted to point out a couple of f of g of 12. So g of 12 spits out 6, and then 6 doesn't show up. If it doesn't show up over here anywhere, that's undefined. Like, you can't plug this into both for whatever reason. At least not with the table of values they've given you. Obviously, this is like a y equals x plus 4 kind of graph, so we could probably get an answer. But they didn't give us that. They just gave us these points, and this is all we have to go off of. Because we honestly don't know what's happening between 4 and 8, or 8 and 12. It could be all sorts of fun stuff that we just don't get a chance to see. G of f of 12, if we go the other direction, means we're going to start with f of 12, spit out 16. 16 then becomes our input over here, and it spits out 8. So here's some more examples. These are just more points, and these are in point form rather than like a table form. But back here, these are just x and f of x. These are basically xy points. X and g of x, these are xy points. So these are xy points, and when it says find f of g, then we want all of the, remember g is our inside function, so g is always our starting point. Our input for our g values are these 4 numbers here, which is why I put f of g of 8, f of g of 5, 10, and 9. Hopefully you can kind of figure out 8 spits out 15, 15 comes up here and is our new input, and 15 spits out 11. 5 spits out 1, 1 becomes this input, 1 spits out 8. So on and so forth. And then you would just say, oh, my f of g answers are these 4 answers. On this one, we have a couple that we are going to get undefined. 8, actually, now we start with f. G of f, f is my inside function. 1 spits out 8, 8 spits out 15. 0 spits out 13, 13 doesn't show up, so that is undefined. 15 spits out 11, 11 doesn't show, undefined. 14 spits out 9, 9 spits out 0. This one, I'll just let you write these down. Hopefully you can see that we go from 4 to 3, 3 to negative 2, and then going the other way, actually all of these are undefined. 3 to negative 2 doesn't show up. That's a positive 2, it doesn't count. All of those are undefined. So find the value given the following functions. So find f of g of 8 and g of f of 8. And you can just plug these into one and then plug it into the other. But definitely give this one a try kind of on your own. See what's happening. Same thing here. We have f of g of 2 and g of f of 2. You could plug in one or the other, but you might as well just find f of g and g of f and then plug in from there. Yeah, normally I have these all written out for you to see, but I'm kind of wanting to challenge you a little bit on this. So you can see kind of what's happening. So that'll be the end of this video. But I will say this, here's f of g and g of f. I didn't plug in any numbers. Here's f of g and g of f, and here's f of g and g and f. So you can hopefully check and see how you did. Then you plug in numbers from there and should be all right.